Have your Bibles turned to Exodus 2, please. Thank you for the invitation to be here. When a congregation has a special event and invites guests, and then they ask you to visit with their guest, that's a big honor. And it's a humbling thing, and I really do appreciate that. I have a lot of flexibility at Meridianville. You can tell I'm not from there. I pronounce it Meridianville. The people from there say Meridianville. And so you can tell who's there and who's not just simply by that. They allow me to travel. My position there is extremely super part-time. I don't even have an office at the building. They just asked me to help incorporate some stuff I was doing at Maysville with their existing program. I didn't go there and start anything new. We're just helping them make the church look like a body, like an organism rather than an organization. I'm afraid sometimes the church looks like compartmentalized circles, and we want those circles to overlap. And I'm in private practice as a therapist, have a small practice in Huntsville. Been doing that for about 18 years, mostly marriage and family stuff. Deal a lot with kids in trouble. Do some specialized protocols with trauma. I work a lot with the police department. I'm a volunteer chaplain. And so I do some work with them. I've been assigned to their SWAT team for 24 years. And I'm their rappel master. I'm not a cop. I'm not a shooter. I'm not an operator. I just hang out with those guys who do. And that comes in handy. And then I run a small challenge course. If you're familiar with Project Adventure or Outward Bound, we do some experience-based learning, adventure-based therapy. And we built the program for the Wellstone Behavioral Services. And so I wear 3 different hats. And then I'm in the Grandpa Club. I've been a grandpa 15 days, and it's pretty cool. I've got a 35-foot treehouse in my backyard I'm building for Gunner. I just completed the zip line, and maybe when they come over, they'll let him ride with Pawpaw. Or he's going to call me Jonesy. That's what my wife has always called me. She doesn't call me Lonnie or Lonzo or any of the nicknames I've ever had. She's always called me Jonesy, so we just assume the baby will hear her call me that, and so that's probably what he'll call me. He can call me anything he wants to. I'm just telling you that right now. That's going to be a good deal. His name is Gunner Jones Watkins, and he's 15 days old, and I drove into Dalton and held him for an hour before I came over here, and I'm wearing a different shirt than I started in. And if you've had new grandchildren, you just do the math. But before we read in our text, we need to do some operational definitions. If I said the term Hebrew, the term Jew, the term Israelite, or children of Israel, you'd recognize those are all the same thing, right? Okay, in Huntsville, Alabama, this means yes. This means no. This means you're not voting. All right? You have Abram, who was known as Abram the Hebrew, probably a word that just means from across the river. Abraham begets Isaac. Isaac begets Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. Jacob's name gets changed to Israel. Those 12 sons become the children of Israel, and the sons of those sons of those sons of those sons are collectively called the children of Israel. During the time of Israel's life, one of his sons was sold into slavery in Egypt. A severe famine came, and about 75 people migrated to Egypt. If you read the Hebrew Bible, it's 70 people. If you read the Septuagint, it's 75 people. The Septuagint counts a couple of grandkids and some folks who were not in the main lineage. That's why you have your different numbers. Some of your versions will read that way. So they move into Egypt. When they get to Egypt, Joseph warns them and says, be very careful not to offend the Egyptians because you are shepherds. It seems that outlying from the nation of Egypt, there were these folks known as the shepherd kings. They were nomadic people, and they often waged war with Egypt. And the Egyptians despised shepherds. And so when they move there, they get given this very fertile land, and they get to keep the flocks of the Pharaoh. But there's never a lot of real interaction between those folks. And so it's very important to notice the difference between a Hebrew, Israelite, Jew, and Egyptians, because it's two different things. If you're a person in Egypt and about 400 years passes and you look out of your window and there's almost 4 million Hebrews living in your area, if the shepherd kings ever attack us and those Israelites who are shepherds join with them, That's kind of scary, isn't it? If you have a large population of non-Americans living in America and America were to go to war, that's scary to some people right now. So the Pharaoh decides that he's going to limit the population of the Israelites and commands that all the baby boys be thrown into the river. Moses' parents comply with that, except they fudge a little bit. They put him in a little basket. The Hebrew word there is the same as Noah's Ark. They built him a little ark out of reeds. And the Pharaoh's daughter finds him and draws him out of the river. They name him Moshe, means drawn out. We're Southern, we call him Moses, but his real name is Moshe. And so they bring him out. So you've got this Hebrew adopted by an Egyptian girl and being raised in the palace. Now let's make sure you understand that. If a Hebrew man marries a Hebrew woman and they have a child, that child is every single time, okay? So you get a Hebrew who marries a Hebrew, what they have is going to be a Hebrew. We had some guys come in, an entrepreneur group came into our challenge course, and they were introducing themselves, and this guy said, "My name's Charlie and I'm from Alabama." I said, "Charlie, you may live in Alabama, but you ain't from here, son." He said, "No, I live here." I said, let me tell you something. If your cat has kittens in the oven, they're kittens, not biscuits, okay? And so you can't come from up there and be down here and call you. No. You're not Southern. You live in the South, but you're not Southern yet. So Moses is going to be raised in the palace, but he's a Hebrew. And he probably has a little identity crisis as he grows up. Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren. Who are his brethren? The Hebrews. He went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian, different than a Hebrew, saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way, he looked that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses goes out. He's looking at the Hebrews versus the Egyptians. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. Premeditation. Make sure nobody's around. Puts him in the sand. And he went out the second day. Behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, "Why are you striking your companion?" And then he said, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" I think it's a real interesting word choice. You know, the kids will say, "Who died and left you boss?" This guy says, "Who made you a prince over us?" So he asked him, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Uh-oh. Moses had looked this way and that way, didn't think he saw anybody or anybody saw him, and he's wrong. Somebody saw him kill this Egyptian, and now he's throwing it back in his face. "Oh, so you're going to be my boss. You're going to be my judge. You're going to be my prince? Well, you intend to kill me like you did that Egyptian?" So Moses realizes his secret's not a secret. And so Moses said, "Surely this thing is known." And when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So Moses recognizes that his secret is not a secret. Pharaoh puts a bounty on him, intends to kill him. And Moses leaves and goes all the way across the wilderness into the land of Midian. And he's in the land of Midian. And while I don't know if you've ever thought about running away from home. If you ever run away from home, you need to take food. You need to take something to keep you warm. You need to take some way to have fresh water. And you need to have some light. If you run away from home, those of you contemplating it, those are the things you need. Moses has run away from home. He's in the wilderness, and what does he find? A well. Well, that's not a bad thing. If you run away from home and the first thing you find is a source of fresh water, this can't be all bad. Verse 16, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill their troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. Now, you know, Moses is winning some points here. Moses runs away from home, and the first thing he finds is a source of fresh water. And while he's sitting here near the fresh water, 7 girls come out of the woods. Well, if you're running away from home and you're a single man and 7 girls, touchdown, Moses. I mean, this running away thing can't be bad at all. You got these 7 girls, they come out. Now, what's happening is these girls come down to this well, and they have to draw water out of the well. Water weighs 8 pounds to the gallon. A sheep won't stick his head down into a deep bucket to drink water. My cup runneth over, the psalmist says. And so they have to take these water and fill these low troughs up all the way around so the sheep can all have access to water and drink. And they got to do this every day. Now, it's interesting, parenting styles are different back then. You got these 7 girls, and it seems to me that every time they get to the water and they dump all this water out in these troughs, the shepherds come out, scatter their flocks, run them away, let their flocks water. They go home. The girls have to do this every day. You'll find out if this story that their father asked them when they come home, how come you're home early today? What, the shepherds were late? They didn't show up? Because these girls will come home early today because they fill their water troughs up. The shepherds come out to run them away. Moses defends them, helps water their flocks, and then they go home early. Parenting nowadays, you'd have somebody out there saying the girls need safe space. There's microaggression at the well. No, their father expected them to solve this problem. Their father expected them to be self-reliant. Their father expected them to deal with difficulties and unfairness in life because that's the only way you grow up. So these girls are here. The shepherds come out. They start to scatter their flock. Moses comes to their rescue and runs the shepherds away. He helps them with watering their flock. And then the girls go home. Verse 18. So when they came to Ruel, their father, he said, how is it that you've come so soon today? He's used to them being late. He's used to them coming in later. And when they walk in late, they get the shepherd. Yeah, the shepherds again. So they're used to this shepherd drama all the time. But today, they're not late. In fact, not only are they not late, they're early. How is it that you've come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us from the hands of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, and where is he? And why is it you've left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. You get the idea that Ruel wants a son-in-law? We saw a man today. Bring him here. Let's feed him. Get this. You know, look, 7 girls. You got a shot. You got a son-in-law. Okay, I'm just saying. All right. So bring the guy here. We'll feed him supper. The thing that interests me is he says, how come you guys are home early today? And their description is an Egyptian rescued us. Is Moses an Egyptian? Moses' father is a Hebrew. Moses' mother is a Hebrew. Moses is every single time. And yet these girls, when he comes out of the woods and rescues them, they go home and they describe him to their father as, listen, this Egyptian rescued us. That made me wonder. I came up with 2 possibilities. Slaves in those days had very dark skin because they worked out in the sun. They did not value a tan like we value a tan. And so they tried to avoid that. So a boy who had grown up as the stepson of the adopted son of the Pharaoh's daughter would have lived in the palace, and he would not have had a tan. Read the Song of Solomon when you're 35. and you'll find out that the lover there says, my boyfriend may not find me attractive because I'm dark-skinned because my brothers make me work in the vineyard. It was a sign of being poor. It was a sign of being a slave, not like in our society where we pay to get tanned. So Moses may have come out of the woods and he may have just been very, very pale. He may have been shaved all over, not hairy like a shepherd. He may have been doing that Egyptian thing. Or Moses could have been in an Egyptian princess costume. His adopted mother is the Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, Moses is probably dressed like a little Egyptian prince. He probably wearing whatever, Abercrombie and Imhotep or whatever they, sold at the mall. Had one of those cool snake hats. When he's a teenager, work backwards, But I think it's the latter, not the former, because when this guy says, hey, who made you a prince over us? You think Moses is out there dressed like a bricklayer? You think Moses is out there dressed like a guy who's gathering straw? I bet he's in this white linen the Egyptians wore. Trimmed in gold, bracelets, a necklace, a headpiece. Moses is a Hebrew. He wants to serve the Hebrews. He wants to protect the Hebrews. He wants to serve the Hebrew God. And yet everybody he runs into seems to think he's an Egyptian. You may or may not have noticed, but I'm 5'4". That's not very tall in America. Some days when I'm getting ready for work, my wife's a school teacher, and a lot of times I get up and cook breakfast. We have 2 boys living with us this summer. Their mom went to basic training, and we volunteered to keep them. We were only going to keep the middle school guy. We didn't realize he had a little brother, so we've had 2 boys at our house all summer. When school started back, I'm the breakfast shift. And so, I usually cook breakfast and get those guys ready because my wife teaches school. I have to get Jay to the high school and Justin to the middle school. But the days when I don't have to cook breakfast for anybody else and it's just me, some days I cook breakfast at Waffle House. So I go to Waffle House, I get one of those big steak omelets. And one day I was sitting at the little counter on the stool, eating my omelet, looking at the clock, getting ready to go. Well, I had to go meet somebody at the office. And I jumped down, and the little girl walked by me, and I was like, "Ma'am." She walked by me again. "Excuse me." And she came by me one more time. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to leave." And she looked at me and almost embarrassed herself. Because she says, "Oh, I didn't realize," and what she started to say was, "I didn't realize you were standing up." Because see, if I sit on a Waffle House stool, I'm about this tall. And if I stand up, I'm about this tall. And I had stood up and she couldn't tell I'd stood up. It's not that funny. A difference which makes no difference is no difference. Write it down. A difference that makes no difference is no difference. If I sing stand up for Jesus and nobody can tell I stood up, what have I done? If I go back to school and I claim to be one of God's children and I claim to be one of God's people, but I look like, I talk like, I dress like, and I value the things the Egyptians value, what good is it to be a Christian in my school? If you claim to be one of the children of light, but I can't tell you turn the light on, you're probably not a child of light, and you're probably fooling yourself, but you're not fooling God. A difference that makes no difference is no difference. And you start making a difference in your environment when you return back to your school or go back to your team or start marching with your band or playing your sport or moms and dads to your office or your neighborhood or wherever. We make that difference when people can look at us and listen to us and see our dress and our manner of life and our values and know that we're children of God, not children of them. Look in the book of Hebrews, if you will. I think that's interesting how the Hebrew writer sums it up. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24. By faith Moses, when he became of age. In the account in Exodus, it says when Moses grew older. Moses was an adult. This is when Moses matured. When Moses got real. When Moses decided to be who Moses was supposed to be. Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Moses said, "Look, I know who I am now. I'm not one of the Egyptians. I'm one of God's children, and you can't call me her son anymore. I won't accept that title. I'm not one of you. I'm not one of them." When Moses grew up, and young people, if you're going to be spiritually mature, if you're going to really make a difference in your school, if we're going to make an impact in our community, we're going to have to be willing to stand up and say, "Hey, we're different." We're going to be willing to stand up and say, "We're not like them." We're going to have to be willing to stand up and say, "I'm not their daughter. I'm not their son. I am a child of God." Moses, when he became of full age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Verse 25, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Moses made a conscious decision. He says, it's going to be uncomfortable to be a child of God. I'm going to be called names. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be punished. And we worry so much about being bullied. Folks, if it's not worth being bullied about, it ain't worth doing. Period. What you are determines what you do. What you do doesn't make you what you are. And when you see yourself a spiritual self-identity, when we see ourselves as children of God and decide that because I am God's child, I talk this way or I don't talk this way. I don't watch these kind of things. I don't read these kind of things. I don't take these liquids. I don't smoke these things. I don't say these words. I don't listen to those jokes, and I don't wear certain clothes. When I make those decisions based on how I see myself, not on a set of rules, but a set of values, and say, look, I refuse to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And I had rather be picked on for being a Christian than I had to enjoy anything that would make me popular in this school. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego made the same kind of choice. They didn't make an outcome-based choice. They said, we may die in this fire, but that idol thing, that's not happening. They chose to be willing to burn before they compromise their principles. And you got to be willing to burn. You got to be willing to lose some things. You got to be willing to give up some things. You got to be willing to be ostracized or punished or whatever. And you got to be willing to say, I would rather suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy what this world offers. Verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater than the riches and treasures of Egypt, because he looked for a reward. He said, if I've got to choose everything that Egypt has to offer, the palace, the riches, maybe even a shot at sitting on the throne one day because his adopted mom, he's the grandson of Pharaoh. He said, if I got to choose that or choose being a servant of God, I'll take being a servant of God. That may mean a career choice. That may mean a friendship choice. That may mean a dating choice. He chose, it is more valuable to be treated bad because of God than everything that Egypt has to offer. And by the way, when he left Egypt at age 40, the Egyptians think he looks like an Egyptian. The Hebrews think he looks like an Egyptian. Jethro's daughters think he looks like an Egyptian. And 40 years later, when he walks into that palace throne room and says, let my people go, he's dressed like a shepherd. He'd been living in the wilderness with sheep for 40 years. And when Moses went back to Egypt and gave him the commands of God, he looked like a servant of God. He left looking like an Egyptian. He came back looking like a shepherd. And young people, if this back to school message has anything for you, it's when you walk into school on Monday morning, will they be able to tell you are one of God's children or you look like one of them? A difference that makes no difference is no difference. Now, on the other side of that, and this, I hesitate to tell you, this sounds like bragging. When I was 29, I got invited to be a chaplain. And that's just a guy that hangs out with police and does ministerial things. Well, early in my career as a chaplain, they assigned me to the tactical unit. And because the tactical guys train once a week, I got to go with them on their training night. So I PT with them, I run with them, I lift weights with them, I shoot on the range with them. They've sicked the dog on me. I've shot the MP5. I'm going to get tased Tuesday. I teach them to rappel. The chief asked me that first summer. He said, "Hey, if I gave you a pager, would you respond when the SWAT team is called out?" And since 1992, I'm sorry. Everything that's ever happened in Huntsville that's involved the tactical unit, I've been on the ground. I've helped them serve warrants. I've helped them do a stakeout. I helped them escort Eric Rudolph when they transferred him from the county courthouse to the federal courthouse. We were in the perimeter when the vice president came to visit Huntsville. I've been involved in all those things. I've got body armor in the car. I've got a Kevlar helmet, a ninja mask. I've got the cool black gloves. I've got an ID card that I can wave at the courthouse and it'll open up the electronic gates. I can go anywhere in Huntsville I want to go. I'm the second oldest person to ever pass the PT test that the SWAT team takes. I've got a teaching position at the police academy. I teach stress management and patrol tactics for the emotionally disturbed persons. I get a lot of really, really, really good stuff with the police. About 4 years ago, a multi-million-dollar company called Intergraph built an exercise facility. Now, they're a government contractor. Everybody who works for them has a security clearance. And they said, hey, because we have our plant here in Huntsville and because we get some tax breaks and stuff, we would like to open up our exercise facility to all law enforcement officers. So they call me up and say, hey, Lonnie, PT or training on Tuesday night is not going to be at the old canine range anymore. We're going to start using Intergraph. So we go into Intergraph and we start to sign in, and they go, write down your badge number. I said, I ain't got a badge number. They said, you need to leave. The SWAT guys bowed up. She said, why don't you have a badge number? I said, well, I'm a chaplain. She said, but you're not a police officer. I said, no, ma'am, I'm not a police officer. She said, you need to leave. Now, if you hung out with me, you would think, hey, he kind of looks like a cop. I know cop logo. I can do some of the 10 codes. I teach at the academy. I've taught weapon retention. I teach building clearing. I've been on every SWAT mission that there's ever been since 1992. But you know what? I don't have a badge and I've never taken an oath. Guess what? I'm not a cop. I can't get in. You sit in this building and you sing about Jesus and you talk about Jesus and you pray to Jesus and you study about Jesus and you look like you kind of hang out with the Jesus people. One of these days you're going to be standing at a gate and somebody's going to say, I need to see your badge. And it doesn't matter how much time you spent with the Jesus people. It doesn't matter how much you look like the Jesus people. If you don't look like the Jesus people that are in this book, faith, repentance, confession, and baptism, you will not get in the facility. And it doesn't matter how close it looks. It doesn't matter how much time you've spent. The bottom line is, I'm not a police officer. And I can't go in. And if you're not a Christian, you can't go in. A difference that makes no difference is no difference. If the world ends and we stood in front of the gate, would you be allowed to go in? If not, you need to fix that tonight while we stand, while we sing.